Welcome to H2K Infosys. H2K Infosys is a e-verify business based in Atlanta, Georgia, United States. We provide 100% job-oriented, instructor-led, face-to-face, true live online software training programs. It also includes access to Cloud Test Lab with software tools. We provide live project for you to work on. We also provide assistance with mock interviews, resume preparation and review, and job placement assistance. H2K Infosys is trusted by so many students across the world. H2K Infosys provides world-class services in IT training with real-time project work for corporates and individuals, special IT training for MS students in the United States, software design, development, QA manual and automation, performance testing and maintenance, IT staff augmentation, job placement assistance, and tech support.
Hi everyone. Folks, everyone able to hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Any doubts in the previous class?
So I have one doubt about listeners.
Mm-hmm.
When I didn't understand what exactly you say if we have a drop down or something like that.
That's in the UI. It's nowhere related to a servlet. I was just giving it for the sake of an example. It's nowhere related with a servlet.
Do we have any other example like real time?
Sorry?
Do we have any other example?
No, see, whenever some servlet related information changes, I think I have confused you more than making you understand things. Do you ever, what is an event? What's an event? Some kind of a, some kind of a functionality that happens, right? On that event, someone listens to it and acts upon it. That's what is the concept of an event and listener. There's an event that occurs, and there will be a listener who listens to the event and performs some action on it. For that event.
Okay, I can understand like in a swing, if you have a button, there is a listener, and whenever event occurs, it will listen it and it will trigger the action.
Okay, then what is your doubt?
My doubt is how can I use this one? Like for filter, I can use it for logging or something. Logging means IP logging. What?
Yes, see, whenever some attribute is added, right, you want to log it. You want to log it in the log about the session attributes that are getting added and everything. So we achieve it with our listeners. So whenever some attributes are getting added to a session, we want to log it. We want to view this information for future purposes, kind of the transactions and all that. So we use a listener, the attribute, we use a HTTP session attribute listener to do that. So whenever some attribute is added, we log it. So we don't explicitly run this code. So whenever there's addition of an attribute, or whenever we try to set an attribute, it goes and executes because this is a listener. There's no explicit call that is making to it. Upon that event, this listener listens to the event and the code inside this respective method gets executed. We have to configure the listener in the web.xml file by specifying the listener class. So everyone, when we are using listeners, we just configure the listeners in the web.xml class, and whenever this listener listens to the session attribute changes, the specific listener, it listens to the session attribute changes. So whenever a session attribute information changes, there is an event, HTTP session binding event that gets generated, and the listener that we have created listens to the event, and specific action, or the specific action will be done based on the event. So whenever, for the sake of an example, we have created a session object and we're trying to set attributes to the session object. So whenever we do that, it comes to this method and it executes the specific code, session attributes and so on. Whatever we try to log it or print it to the console, that gets printed to the console. Okay, Manoj, now tell me, what is the doubt?
No, I was reading. I'm reading about listeners on web.
Okay.
No, I think it's clear. So basically, what I understand.
Listeners are something wherein we want to do a specific action upon some events. So we don't explicitly invoke this. So because it's something which should happen automatically upon that event. That's what the concept of the listener is for. You understand that?
Yeah.
Folks, everyone understand the concept of a listener. It could be a servlet listener, but now we are discussing about servlet listeners. But listener is something which, let's say, folks, a simple example in the UI also. I have a drop down for countries and I have a second drop down for states. Depending on the country selection, the states drop down gets changed, right? If I select USA, the states are different. If I select India, the states are different. So when something gets changed in the first drop down, there will be a listener which listens to the change and it goes and fetches the states based on the country selection. That's kind of an event, or that's an example of a listener when we configure some listeners functionally. It's more in the UI, we call it as like an AJAX functionality and all that. But it's the concept is an event and a listener over there.
But we can programmatically do that. Like,
yes.
Clicking a drop down or changing the country.
Yes. We have to do that programmatically, right? So we're talking about listeners. We can do it in a program, like instead of putting information in web.xml. No, we are putting here in a web.xml because it's related to a servlet, right? But in general, we don't need to configure listeners in web.xml file. These are servlet listeners. That's the reason we are configuring it here. If we're doing some on-chain or something, we don't configure them in a web.xml file. We don't do that.
Okay.
The servlet listeners, they have to be configured in the web.xml file. But if you have something else related to web or UI, we don't need to, some UI listeners, on-chain or those. If you have specific listeners, we don't need to configure it in a web.xml file. These listeners we're discussing right now are specific to servlet listeners, specific to a context object or a section object in the example that we are seeing right now.
I can tell one example right now coming in my mind. If you see like websites like, for example, FedEx, when you go on the front page, you need to choose a country like on a map. and as soon as you're clicking on that region, I think it's setting the attribute like this will be the region for next sessions, all the sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that we can configure a servlet. Listener.
Why? It's a part of the session object, right? The information is carried across. Isn't it something carried in a session object?
Yeah.
It's a tracking purpose, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's what I'm telling. I was just looking into FedEx.com.
No, what is the doubt? The information that is carried across the session is like the session tracking. It's not a session tracking. They put the information in the session so that they could reuse it in across the application. Right?
No, I was talking about a practical example. So that's why.
I mean, what is your question? How is your question? I mean, I didn't get your question related to FedEx.
No, I was trying to think about.
Why are you laughing? Is something funny, Manoj? I mean, you could share it with all of us in the class so that we all
No.
with you.
No, it's not like that. What I'm trying to say was, I was thinking about example, like a practical example where I can use a listener, okay, not just a drop down or something, okay. So I opened because I worked in a FedEx, so I know that while clicking on a map, it will choose your region, and for next sessions, it will take your region from that one only. Okay.
Yes,
So
it's not a listener. It's the information that is part of the session. That is what I'm trying to tell you. It's not a listener. It's the information that is kept as part of the session, and that information is used across the application.
Yeah, that's right.
Where do you see a listener over there? I mean, I'm really not getting, because if you have some kind of an information as a reason and you're trying, I mean, it's used across in the further pages. It's like if it's used across the application, that information is stored as part of a session and it's used across the application, right? I mean, there's no concept of a listener there, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Or I'm missing something.
No. No, not like that.
No. See, I'm not just saying it. Maybe, if you're saying that there's a kind of a value that there's some map values about the region, and that values are used across the application. It's like the information. It's not for the session tracking though, but there is some information which we put in the session so that we could reuse it across the application, right? So that the information is maintained as part of session and is used across the application. It's not a listener kind of. It doesn't seem to me as a listener. It's something you put it in a session so that throughout the application, with the session object, we can retrieve the information, the region information.
Okay.
Does make sense for you?
Yeah.
See, sometimes even though when we're trying to add some, let's say whenever some user tries to make a transaction, right? So we try to put that in a session, that value or the kind of data in a session. We try to set the attribute in a session. As soon as it's done, as soon as it's set, but even the user doesn't make a transaction loop, we want to do some action with it, some kind of a validation, let's say, right? That we do as a listener. Instead of, the request going back to it, as soon as it's done, let's say we want to do a validation, we keep it as the listener. So any doubts in the listener? Manoj, are you convinced or?
Yeah. I mean, if I have doubt, I'll come with the question tomorrow again.
Okay. There could be different kind of listeners. Here we're talking about the servlet listeners. But listeners can be of many types. Okay, if you don't have any doubts, we'll move on to JSP, Java Server Pages. Okay. Folks, why do we need the Java Server Pages when we already have HTML? With HTML, we're able to build websites. We're able to build a website with HTML. What is the need of a JSP? Anyone have any idea on what's the advantage of JSP, let's say, over a HTML pages? Folks, anyone have any idea on it?
If we want to provide any response to client in the form of page, so if we want to provide any dynamic values, then we use JSP instead of HTML because HTML provides only static content.
Yes, the word is the dynamic content. So JSP is a technology for developing web pages for the support of dynamic content. So the JSP enables developers to put Java code in a HTML page by making special JSP tags. And a different syntax which we see in the JSP is the splitlets. Whatever you see here in the Angular brace is with percentages, right? So this is a different kind of syntax that we see, and this is used to render the Java content inside a HTML page. So using JSP, we can collect input from the users through the forms by having a web page form and present records from a database, by creating the web pages dynamically. Right? For example, if I just have a HTML page and if someone opens it, right? It says Twinkle opens it. With the HTML page, I cannot dynamically say Hello Twinkle. Right? If Shiny opens it, I cannot say Hello Shiny. Because the name has to be dynamic for the page that's getting rendered, the name has to be dynamic, and that cannot be achieved with a HTML page. The HTML doesn't support dynamic content. The dynamic part is rendered using Java. Whatever code that we have in a .java file, we can just have the same code in a JSP. So the advantage over active server pages is it's more portable and it's the same code that can be reused across the operating system. And when we compare it with a servlet, right? So whenever we are writing or we are rendering some content in a browser, what do we do in a servlet? We write, we try to add it to the out object, right? Having so many println statements, right? And when you're viewing some content in a page, it makes more sense to have, or it's more convenient to write a regular HTML page instead of having a lot of println statements that are used to generate the HTML. If you remember the servlet code that we have written, to print headers, request headers in a table, we were doing so many println statements to render the content. Right? So instead, it's more convenient to write a HTML page and include Java content in it than having so many println statements in Java, right? And the server side includes is mainly used, this is what we're discussing, comparison against other things which were there in market before JSP. So, and this is like for small simple applications, and it's not really used for the real-time programs that gets the data from the JSP, like the form data and making database connections and all of the stuff. And JSP that is compared with the JavaScript the JavaScript is a client side. When I say client side, it's done at the browser end. The JavaScript can generate HTML dynamically on the client, but cannot interact with a web server, like, persistence the most. As in, it cannot insert or store somewhere in a file or a database, or it cannot get that, some kind of a image processing type of thing. And the database access cannot be achieved with the JavaScript. And when compared with HTML is used for static content, and of course, HTML cannot be used for dynamic information, which is the sole purpose of JSP. Is to
Ajax.
Ajax is a concept. It's not a it's a feature actually. Ajax is basically making an asynchronous request. It's not like a HTML or it's not a JS. It's not a kind of a technology that is used. It's a kind of a request that is made is Ajax. The kind of a request, what is Ajax? It's an asynchronous. Making an asynchronous request is an Ajax call. It's not a technology.
Okay.
In the JSP architecture, the JSP container, it's basically inside a web server, and it provides the runtime environment or other services for a JSP needs. So it's a web server, and just like our servlets, the JSP files reside in a server. The JSP files are stored in JSP server engine is part of the web server. And whenever the client makes a request through internet, the request goes to the server and it responds back with the specific content. And this JSP features or through the servlet engine, they can interact with the database. And they can put data into the database or get data from the database. So, in the JSP architecture, it's more of a similitude and servlet, wherein with the JSP resides in a web server and is in JSP servlet engine, and the JSP can interact with the database to store the information or get the information back to and fro from the server. And so, when we write a JSP page, what's the content that can go in JSP page, right? Any normal page, right? When you make for a HTML page, what happens? The browser sends a HTTP request and gets a response back, right? It's the same thing that happens with a JSP. A HTTP request is sent to the web server, and the server responds back with a response. So, the web server recognizes the request is for a JSP page, and the request is forwarded to the JSP engine. So, how does it make it? In the URL or the JSP page, it is ending with a .jsp instead of a .html, right? The request goes to the JSP engine, and the JSP engine is responsible for loading the JSP page from this, and it converts into a servlet content. So something very interesting is JSP gets converted into a servlet. So whatever the template text that's present is converted into a printed statement, and all the JSP elements, the syntax that we have seen is scriptless syntax with the angular, brace, and the percentage. They get converted into Java code. That's corresponding with the dynamic behavior. In a JSP page, we have the template text, and we have the Java-related code that's in a JSP page. So the template text is converted using the println, but we don't do it. But that's how it happens intentionally. We just write a JSP page, and we don't do the conversion of the servlet. It the JSP engine does it. So first, the JSP is converted to a Java code, and the JSP engine compiles the servlet. First phase is the conversion of a JSP into a servlet. So it differentiates the template text and the Java code that is written in it. Because when we're writing a Java code, we use a scriptlet. And the JSP is converted to a servlet. And the JSP engine compiles the servlet. Because what's compiling? Because the servlet is nothing but a Java class, right? The Java class has to get compiled into an executable, a class file, and the request is sent to a servlet engine. So the servlet engine loads the servlet class and it executes it. The servlet, as I've seen, it produces output in a HTML format, and the response is sent back to the browser. From the server, the HTTP response is sent back to the browser in terms of a static HTML content. Whatever the browser understands is more of the HTML content. So finally, the response is rendered as the HTML content. But it could be different. Let's say I have a screen, I'm searching for something. Those words get different. But finally, the content I get is HTML content. Though it's not saved, it's dynamically generated. So whenever the client sends a request, right, it connects to a specific JSP, and then the specific it comes back to the container, and then it generates a servlet, the Java file, and this Java file gets compiled into .class file. So during the translation, when you see a life cycle of the JSP, and there's the translation phase and the request process. So from the creation till the destruction is the life cycle of a JSP or a service, right? Till they get from the point they get created till the point they're destroyed, we call it as a life cycle, right? So the JSP life cycle is similar to a servlet life cycle with an additional step of the conversion of a JSP into a servlet. What is converted to a servlet, the last step is there, the same as a servlet. But in JSP, and there's an additional step which compiles the JSP or converts the JSP into a servlet. So the compilation, initialization, and the execution, and then the cleanup. So the method in servlets, we have like the init, service, and destroy. But in the JSP, we have like the JSP init, JSP service, and JSP destroy methods. But the purpose, though, is of these methods is the same. In the servlet or JSP, the purpose of these methods is the same. The names are prefixed with JSP in the case of the JSP. So the initialization is done in the JSP init, and the main logic or the request processing happens as part of the JSP service method, and the shutdown is the JSP destroy. So in the JSP compilation phase, the JSP is passed and it's converted into a servlet, and the servlet class is compiled during the compilation phase. And during the initialization, so the container loads the JSP, then invokes the JSP in its method before serving any request. And the execution, the JSP service method of the JSP is invoked once per request. Whenever the request comes, it's the JSP service method. And the cleanup, of course, is part of the JSP destroy method. So this is life cycle. The life cycle of a JSP, as already mentioned, is similar to that of the servlet with an additional step of the conversion.
So many of our students have given testimonials on how our training programs are. You will find them on kudzu.com and on our website h2kinfosys.com. On our website h2kinfosys.com, you will also find more detailed information on who we are, the courses that we offer, what each course covers. Also, if you're interested in a demo program, please register on our homepage on the left-hand side. Just give us more information about yourself and we will send you a link for a demo class. The demo class is absolutely free. Experience our commitment by just attending an orientation workshop at no cost. Our team of faculty and advisors are here to guide you with the right information. If you still have more questions, please feel free to call us. Call us at 770-777-1269. This is a United States number. If you're calling from the UK, call us at 020-337-17615. You can also email us at training@h2kinfosys.com or h2kinfosys@gmail.com. Thank you for watching our videos. We wish you a great career in information technology.